A man once told me about a plant they call loco weed. When horses or cows eat it, they go wild and can't be controlled. That kind of story sets the tone for what Durk Blocker, son of actor Dan Blocker, is now sharing about his life and family. Durk Blocker was only 14 years old when his father, Dan Blocker, famous for playing Hoss Cartwright on the TV show Bonanza, died suddenly in 1972. For more than 50 years, Dirk kept his feelings inside. But now, at age 67, he's finally speaking out. What he says has surprised many fans. Dirk, who later became known for his role in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, talks about how his father's fame changed their family life. He remembers the constant attention from fans everywhere they went, and how his dad's busy schedule caused him to miss important moments in Dirk's childhood. He also reveals how these experiences shaped his own journey into acting. Many people didn't expect such personal and emotional stories from the son of a beloved TV character. Dan Blocker himself had a remarkable life. He was born on December 10, 1928, in Dalhart, Texas, and even his birth was extraordinary. He weighed 14 pounds at birth, so big that it set a county record. The doctor even wrote his name wrong on the birth certificate, calling him Bobby Dawn instead of Bobby Dan Davis Blocker. His mother Mary had a very painful labor, and his father, Shaq, likely had no idea that his baby boy would one day become one of the biggest stars on American television. The family later moved to a small town called O'Donnell in West Texas. Life wasn't easy. They were still mourning the loss of Dan's older sister Virginia, who had died of pneumonia at age 11. Dan was only 5 at the time. His dad opened a grocery store, and they lived in the back. Dan helped out from a young age, bagging groceries and carrying heavy sacks of cattle feed. He quickly became known in town, not just because he was the grocer's kid, but because of his impressive size and strong work ethic. By the time Dan was 10, he was already 5 feet tall and weighed 105 pounds. At 12, he was 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds. He was bigger than most adults. People remembered him boxing with older boys in the middle of Main Street on Saturday nights. He never lost. There was even a story that he once lifted a car off someone when it fell off a jack. Whether true or not, nobody doubted he had the strength to do it. In high school, he was already 6 feet 4 inches and weighed 275 pounds, with huge feet that required size 14.5 shoes. His father joked that Dan was too big to ride a horse and too small to pull a wagon, implying he didn't fit anywhere. But that large size would soon help make him famous. When Dan was 12, his parents sent him to Texas Military Institute in San Antonio. It was a strict, disciplined school that once trained famous leaders like General Douglas MacArthur. The experience gave Dan focus and strength, qualities he would use later in life. In 1946, he went to college at Hardin-Simmons University, where he played football and was naturally good at it because of his size. But his life changed when he transferred to Sul Ross State University in 1947. There, he worked backstage in a play called Arsenic and Old Lace. He was just supposed to carry fake dead bodies. But something about being part of the theater clicked for him. He switched his major from physical education to drama. Though he kept playing football and worked hard jobs like rodeo work and bar bouncing to pay for school, acting became his passion. He wasn't just strong. He could also express deep feelings on stage. His professors and classmates were impressed. In 1950, he graduated with a degree in speech and drama. Even though sports teams and boxing promoters offered him money, he turned them all down. He didn't want to rely on his fists or size. He wanted to be an artist. That same year, he moved all the way to Boston to join a theater group. He didn't know anyone, and the pay was low, but he loved it. He performed in many plays, learning fast and taking on all kinds of roles. But then, in late 1950, life changed again. The Korean War had started, and Dan was drafted into the army. At 6 feet 4 inches and over 250 pounds, it wasn't easy to find gear that fit him. It took a month just to get him boots in size 14.5. After basic training in Louisiana, he was sent to Japan and then to the front lines in Korea. Dan joined the 45th Division, and his fellow soldiers quickly nicknamed him the Big Un. He was first a private, but his natural leadership helped him rise to corporal, then sergeant, and finally master sergeant. He fought in dangerous, freezing conditions. In total, he saw 209 days of active combat. Christmas Eve 1951 was one of the hardest times. His unit was pinned down on Hill 255 for 10 hours in the cold and dark. In May 1952, he fought during a deadly battle on Hill 200. 6 American soldiers died, and 21 were injured. But his unit also fought back hard and took out over 130 enemy troops. He faced gunfire, mortar attacks, and more, but never gave up. Durk Blocker was once shot while trying to save his injured friends during the Korean War. That brave act earned him the Purple Heart, a high military honor, but it also deeply affected him. After seeing the horrors of war, he returned home with a changed heart. He became outspoken against war, especially the Vietnam War. He made it clear that he didn't want to see American bombs falling on innocent people after witnessing so much pain himself. But the war also showed something else about him. He was a natural leader. He helped plan and carry out dangerous missions in tough places like Pork Chop Hill and Old Baldy. On one mission, his squad walked right into an ambush. They were outnumbered and far into enemy territory. But Blocker stayed calm and led them through the fight. Even though his large size made him an easy target, he carried wounded soldiers to safety. He never backed down. When his unit left Korea in July 1952, he had earned many awards. The Combat Infantryman Badge, the Korean Service Medal with 2 campaign stars, the Korean Presidential Unit Citation, and others. His military service ended on September 24, 1952. Just 2 days later, he married Dolia Lee Parker, the woman he had loved throughout the war. He had written her letters from Korea, and now they were finally together. They had a small wedding in Carlsbad, New Mexico. That same week, Dan returned to college at Sul Ross State Teachers College and earned his master's degree in drama. He still dreamed of becoming an actor, but he needed money, so he began teaching high school English and drama in Sonora, Texas. His students remembered his deep, booming voice, especially when he read Shakespeare. After a year in Sonora, he moved to Carlsbad and became a 6th grade teacher. He also coached at Eddy Elementary School. Even while teaching, Blocker never gave up his dream of acting. He brought his love for theater into the classroom and treated it like a stage. Then something unexpected happened. During a summer vacation, Dan and his family went on a trip to Hollywood. They weren't looking for jobs, just relaxing. But fate stepped in. While Dan was using a phone booth, dressed in cowboy boots, a flashy shirt, and a big straw hat, a talent agent saw him. At 6 feet 4 inches and over 300 pounds, he looked like a character straight out of a western. The agent didn't even need an audition, just one look, and he knew Dan belonged on TV. Meanwhile, Dan's wife and kids were waiting in the car, completely unaware that their lives were about to change forever. At that time, Hollywood was full of Western shows, and Dan had the perfect look, rugged, strong, and real. That simple moment on the sidewalk turned out to be the start of something big. But Dan didn't move to California to be famous. In 1956, he actually moved to Los Angeles to earn a PhD in education from UCLA. He was serious about his studies. To support his family, he worked as a substitute teacher in Glendale. He had 4 children, twin daughters Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, born in 1953, David, born in 1955, and Dirk, born in 1957. Life was busy, but Dan balanced it all. School, work, and family. He didn't become a star overnight. In 1957, he played a silly monster called The Goon in a Three Stooges short film called Outer Space Jitters. It was a low-budget sci-fi comedy, only 17 minutes long and filmed in 2 days. He was even credited as Don Blocker, not his real name. A year earlier, he made his TV debut in Sheriff of Cochise as a bartender. In the following years, he appeared in many westerns, including Gunsmoke, Have Gun, Will Travel, Colt .45, The Rifleman, and Cheyenne. He usually played tough guys, outlaws, soldiers, or strongmen. These small roles weren't glamorous, but they helped him get noticed. One key moment in his early acting career came when he played Hognose Hughes in Maverick. Dan later said it was his most important early role. The show was different from other westerns. It was smart and funny. Dan wasn't just a big guy. He could be funny too. This role showed casting directors he had charm and range, not just size and strength. That balance of comedy and heart would later define his most famous character, Hoss Cartwright. In 1958, Dan got a recurring role in Cimarron City, where he played Carl Tiny Budinger. The show didn't last long, but it led to a big connection. Producer David Dortort, who remembered Dan from earlier work, was working on a new western about a family of ranchers. When the creators of Bonanza started casting in 1959, they weren't sure about most roles, but one thing was certain. The role of Hoss Cartwright was written just for Dan Blocker. They didn't even audition anyone else. At first, Bonanza was slow to gain an audience. It ranked 45th in the ratings. But Dan's performance helped change that. Over time, the show became incredibly popular. A few years later, it was the most watched show in the US. Originally, Hoss Cartwright was written as a comic character, a big guy who wasn't very bright. But Dan didn't play him that way. He used his education, heart, and intelligence to make Hoss kind, thoughtful, and lovable. The writers noticed and changed the role to match him. Hoss became the emotional center of the show, the one who showed right from wrong and gave the Cartwrights their moral strength. Behind the scenes, the work was hard. Unlike today's shows, Bonanza filmed over 30 episodes each year. That meant long days, 14 hours, 5 days a week. Dan had to arrive at 7 a.m. and often stayed until 9 p.m. The heat, costumes, horseback riding, and stunts were exhausting, especially for someone his size. Sometimes he fainted from the heat. Still, he kept working. Dan once said he saw his TV family more than his real one. By 1972, he had filmed 415 episodes. That kind of work would wear out any actor. What makes his story even more emotional is that he gave up so much for his career. Long before Bonanza made him a star. Dan Blocker, a star lost, a legacy remembered. By the time Dan Blocker passed away, Bonanza was already deep into its 13th season. The show had become a staple of American television, one of the most enduring westerns in history. But when Blocker died, something irreplaceable vanished with him. His character, Hoss Cartwright, had become the emotional center of Bonanza. Losing him wasn't just a change in casting, it was a wound. Ratings plummeted. As producer Richard Collins put it, just as we personally suffered a loss, so the audience suffered one too. The first episode of season 14 drew strong numbers, driven by public curiosity. But after that, viewership fell by nearly 40%. NBC partly blamed the sharp drop on a move to Tuesday nights, but the truth was simpler. Fans couldn't connect with Bonanza without Hoss. Even Lorne Greene, who played Ben Cartwright, felt it. He told his wife, "That's it. It's finished." And he was right. In November 1972, NBC cancelled Bonanza. The final episode aired on January 16, 1973. After 14 seasons and 431 episodes, the curtain fell on a show that had defined an era. But in O'Donnell, Texas, Blocker's hometown, his memory still stands tall. Literally. On July 4, 1973, just 14 months after his passing, a bronze bust of Dan Blocker was unveiled in a quiet corner of town. The plaque below it reads, "Thanks to film, Hoss Cartwright will live." But all too seldom does the world get to keep a Dan Blocker. The statue stands near where his father, Shaq Blocker, once ran a general store. Young Bobby Dan, before the fame, before the television sets, used to help out there. Across the street, the old bank building houses the O'Donnell Heritage Museum. On the second floor is a room dedicated entirely to Dan's life. From his record-breaking 14-pound birth in Bowie County to his rise as one of America's most beloved TV personalities, every artifact tells a story. Even as you enter O'Donnell on Highway 87, a giant mural of Blocker greets you, painted on the side of a barn. It's more than a tribute. It's a declaration. This small town raised a gentle giant. Durk Blocker, carrying the legacy. Born in Los Angeles on July 31, 1957, Dan's son Dennis Durk Blocker, known professionally as Dirk, was only 14 when he lost his father. But even before that, he had already stepped into the world of television. At age 7, he appeared in a car commercial alongside his dad. 2 years after Dan's death, Dirk landed his first TV role on Marcus Welby MD at just 16. By 19, he had secured a regular part as First Lieutenant Jerry Bragg on Bar Bar Black Sheep, which aired from 1976 to 1978. Dirk's career blossomed quietly over the years. He appeared in Poltergeist, 1982, Starman, 1984, and classic series like MASH *, The X-Files, and even 2 Bonanza spin-off films, Bonanza, The Return and Bonanza, Under Attack, playing a reporter. But it wasn't until much later, at age 56, that Dirk found his breakout comedic role. From 2013 to 2021, he starred as the bumbling but lovable Detective Hitchcock in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Appearing in 147 episodes, he carved out his own identity, not just as Dan Blocker's son, but as a gifted comic actor in his own right. Now in his 60s, Dirk has begun opening up about what it was like to grow up in the shadow of a TV legend. He remembers how fans would mob his family in public, how fame seemed to follow them everywhere. That early experience shaped him. He never chased the spotlight the way others might have. Instead, he became a reliable character actor, someone who let the work speak for itself. Still, he never stepped out of his father's shadow entirely, and he never tried to. Dan Blocker's presence was a mix of pride and pressure. Dirk wanted to honor his father's name while proving he could stand on his own. He's spoken about the surreal experience of seeing his father on TV while also remembering the man who used to tuck him in at night. Few people grow up like that, he said. Watching the world love someone you've lost, that never stops being strange. More than a star. Dan Blocker wasn't just a television icon. He was a genuinely kind and humble man. Cast and crew who worked with him rarely spoke about his acting first. Instead, they talked about his warmth, his humor, and the way he treated everyone, famous or not, with the same quiet respect. He never acted like a star. He acted like a good man who happened to be on TV. And that's the legacy that lives on, in statues, in reruns, and in the hearts of millions who remember the gentle giant who once made Sunday night something to look forward to.